we're going to get into maybe some of the reasons why they had some of these issues leading into this album. But first, we're going to touch on our by the numbers for Oasis. And they do have another album on the list. The previously mentioned What's the Story Morning Glory is also on the list. So we're going to just do a few. We don't want to suck all the numbers out for the next time we have to cover this.
You mean hoover them up for our UK audience?
Yes, yes.
Good. I'm hoping you could drop more Britishisms
I,
in.
I will do my best.
Yes. So, the first number I'm going to throw out is 2.4 million, which is the number of copies that definitely may be sold in the UK alone. So, it sold 1 million copies in the US and it went platinum here, but 2.4 million is 8 times platinum in the UK. And also, just to give you a little bit of context, okay? The UK has a population of 67 million. The US has a population of 332 million. So 2.4 million copies in the UK is the equivalent of 11 million copies in the US.
Wow.
That is how big they were in the UK. And you want to talk about sort of chart positioning and stuff like that. They hit number 1 in the UK. Number 58 in the US was the highest chart position for this album. So there was clearly some divide going on across the pond that people on this side were not privy to. It has been accredited to the US was mired in its pessimistic grunge phase, and the UK was liking this more optimistic type of sound that they were going for, because all in all, their lyrics are not super downer. I want to fucking kill myself, which is what a lot of that grunge stuff is if you listen close.
Yeah, Fell on Black Days versus
rock
and roll star.
That's a good point. I think this is definitely much more upbeat, much more let's have a great living your best life with the lads, on a Saturday night kind of thing.
Totally. Now, the next number I am going to throw out is 350,000. And that is the number of people that Oasis played in front of over the course of 1 week in 1996. They were fucking massive. Now, that does include 2 consecutive $125,000 person Nebworth shows over the course of 2 days. But that still means that they played for 100,000 more people over the course of that week.
Wow.
That's pretty damn big. And as much as I said, like, this manufactured chart battle with Blur wasn't playing to that many people at that time or ever, really.
The proof is in the numbers, man. Yeah, you can't fake that.
Them. Yeah. So the next number I'm going to put out there is 5th, as in Oasis was said to be the 5th priority for bassist Paul McGuigan, behind cricket, Doctor Who, weed, and Manchester City football.
That's great.
This is at the height of their popularity. They're like, no, he will definitely want to watch Doctor Who or a Man City game as opposed to practice or work on the new album or anything like that.
You just hit all the rest of the UK references I had saved up. You hit all of them right there. So well
nice. So the next number I have is 2, which is the number of Oasis hits that prominently feature the line, "I said maybe," which I found to be just a little weird and distracting. I didn't think about the fact that I live forever. I said maybe, I don't. And then clearly Wonderwall. I mean, I don't know if I'm guessing Noel wrote maybe, and then Liam just came, I said maybe, with his sort of affectation on maybe both of them. But it was a little distracting, I gotta say.
Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't notice that until you just mentioned it, but that's, yeah. Listen, they're not fans of writing more lyrics, Tom. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. And then at least once, which is the number of times that this band broke up before they even released their first album. The ones that I am speaking of is a time where they were playing a show in San Francisco and Noel quit because Liam had gotten so drunk that he played like shit and then started throwing stuff at him, and Noel was like, fuck this, I quit. And then they got back together. This is before the album was out, but they were already popular enough to be playing in America. So very clearly they've had some turbulence, and we will definitely get into that when we do our background. But before we do, quick plea to all of you people who are listening and made it this far and are ready to hear our spicy takes on Oasis. If you could just rate and review, give us 5 stars. Maybe also listen to a couple of other episodes that we do if this is your first time here and you're feeling a little salty about our takes. It'd be great to just get some feedback. You can write us at 1001 Album Complaints. We also have a Patreon. I would love if you could go over to the Patreon. We're going to keep giving you the same content every week. We're doing some bonus stuff for the Patreon, but if you like what we do and you want to buy us a beer or two while we do all the research for this, because it does take a lot of time and a lot of beers, we certainly would appreciate it. We also got some merch links below for basically everything that I said. Now, let's go ahead and get to the background on Oasis. So, Oasis, 5 members in the band. We have Liam and Noel Gallagher, Paul Arthurs on guitar, affectionately known as Bonehead, Paul McGuigan, known as Guigsy, on bass, and Tony McCarroll on drums, who does not get a cool nickname. Basically, they get their start as a band called Rain, which was formed by Guigsy, Arthurs, and McCarroll. They had another lead singer, this guy named Chris Hutton. He's promptly kicked out of the band, though, and replaced with Liam Gallagher. Now, Liam is described as very outgoing. He's like the class clown, show-off type. He also is the most popular kid in school and apparently the toughest kid in school.
Really?
So think about this for a second. You're this guy, Chris Hutton. You're in a band. You start a band with your friends, and then you get kicked out of your band for the most popular kid in school.
No.
And then they become Oasis and make millions of fucking dollars. He's got to have such a drinking problem at this point. I can't imagine. He's just like a normal, well-adjusted dude. He's probably like working at a copy center, just like these fucking guys playing, Live Forever, the sound system 3 times an hour in the 90s. I fucking hate you guys so much.
Maybe, hey, there's a Beatles tie, right? Pete Best, same thing, the drummer before Ringo. So maybe there are some parallels.
There we go. All right. So Liam is not particularly musical. He is, again, kind of a scrapper, he's an asshole. Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat.
No kidding.
He's an asshole. All right. Yeah.
Couldn't tell.
His reputation kind of precedes him.
Yeah. So he describes an incident where kids from a rival school come over to their school to start shit. And he's outside smoking with his friends, and a bunch of other kids from another school come over, and he's like, fuck you kids, I will totally throw down with you. And one of the kids hits him in the head with a hammer and like splits his scalp open. Jesus. Blood everywhere. According to Liam, he says that from that day on, it is as if a switch went off in his head, and then he started hearing music. And that's what got him into music. He literally has credited this kid for like jarring something loose in his brain and making him all of a sudden musical. How musical he is up for debate, but that has been his claim. So
that's wild.
Basically, these guys are like, hey, Liam, you should come be the singer in our band. You got the attitude, you got the swagger, you got the look. He dresses cool. He's got a cool haircut. He just seems like he was like the easy popular kid, and by easy I mean like everything came easy to him popular kid, which would have annoyed the shit out of me if I was a classmate of his, certainly. And he's like, great, I would love to join your band. I demand you change the name of the band, by the way. Because he said that the band The Rain was a stupid name, a terrible name. It's got nothing on this great band name that I've been sitting on for a while, Oasis. Which it's debatable. Which of those names is better?
They're right.
No, I think Oasis is way better. Yeah, I think it was a good call. But what a way to start your relationship with new bandmates.
Yeah, let me in your band. I'm calling all the shots. Who the hell are you?
It's what they call a power move.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like I'm fucking Liam Gallagher. God damn it. So apparently the name Oasis came from a poster that he had in his room for this band, the In Spiral Carpets, which also speak of a name that is way worse than Oasis and The Rain. In Spiral Carpets is not a good band name. So apparently they had he had a tour poster of theirs, and it listed one of the venues on their tour as the Swindon Oasis. And he just thought that that seemed like, oh, Oasis. This name keeps popping up everywhere. Oasis, Oasis. This is great, great band name. As a connection, it turns out that the drum tech for the In Spiral Carpets, and probably the reason why he had the band poster on his wall, was none other than Liam's older brother, Noel Gallagher. So Liam is 5 years younger than Noel. So Noel is at this point actually out of the house. He's working. But growing up, it had been Paul Gallagher, was the firstborn. And then you got Noel Gallagher, who's born a year after Paul. And then 5.5 years later, Liam is born. So right from the start, their mom says that there was some animosity because Liam became like the baby, the charmer in the family. Everybody loved him. And Noel went from being the loved baby to the afterthought middle child, who then also had to share a room with his brother because they didn't have an extra room. And so he's sharing a room with somebody 5.5 years younger than him. His older brother gets his own room. He's fucking pissed about it. And basically from the get-go, these kids are button heads all the time. And it makes a lot of sense because Noel is described as a loner. He's a recluse. He's always playing guitar. He's always writing. He's got a quote that says, "Once I discovered weed and guitars, and it got you into another world. Why would I want to go out?" Right? So you got these two very different personality types. You got Mr. Outgoing. I want to talk all the time. I need attention constantly. And Mr. Leave me the fuck alone. And they're crammed into this small room together. One of them significantly older than the other one. They're oil and water. What somebody described it as, Noel's got a lot of buttons and Liam's got a lot of hands. And that was like they're basically, Liam just knows how to get under Noel's skin all the time. And Noel is very easy to annoy. So Noel is basically, at this point, he is a guitar tech for the In Spiral Carpets. He's been super into music since he was young. And that is actually one of the things that the brothers shared. They both said that their favorite thing in the world was to go out, buy a new record, get a bag of weed, get completely ripped, and listen to it at full volume. And like, that's my idea of heaven. That's my perfect weekend. I get a little bit of money in my pocket. I go out, I find a new record I've never heard of. I get super baked and I just listen to it at full volume.
I got to admit, that still sounds pretty good. I haven't done that in a while.
Yeah, it's not terrible, right? It's, I can see that being a good bonding experience for them. So, they're not poor, but they're underclass. Their mom's working a bunch of jobs. They kind of said that their mom sort of raised them by themselves. Their dad was in the picture, but it doesn't sound like he was a great dad. He was, and to preface this, they were both Irish Catholics who had moved to Manchester in the 60s.
Okay.
So, basically his mom moves to Manchester in the 60s, meets his dad, and they start popping out. They pop out 2 kids within like 2 years of getting married. Or I think it's even like a year and a half of getting married. They have like 2 kids. It's, and then a little while later, they have their 3rd kid. That ends up being the whole family, but their mom's working a bunch of jobs. They're definitely thinking about money a lot because they're just, they're underclass. There are things that they want that they can't have. But Noel goes ahead and he gets a job working for the In Spiral Carpets as a drum tech. A job for which
wait, hold on. Sorry. Is he a drum tech or a guitar tech? Because I think you've said both.
Oh, did I say guitar tech earlier? I apologize. He was a drum tech. He was not a guitar tech. And the reason that I know that he was definitely a drum tech and not a guitar tech is because he has described that as a job that he was in no way qualified to do, was to be a drum tech. He basically bullshitted his way into being the drum tech for the In Spiral Carpets and kind of like had no intention of ever being in a band. He played guitar for himself. He wrote songs, but he never played with other people. And it didn't really seem like the path that he was going to pursue. He gets the job as the drum tech for the In Spiral Carpets. And, they're a decently popular band. He ends up touring with them. He goes and tours in America a couple of times. He goes to South America. They go to Japan.
Oh,
like
wow.
He's kind of living a cool lifestyle.
This was like when Manchester was really popping musically, right?
Yeah, there was. I mean, and a big part of that was sort of the kind of the Blur connection, right? I think Blur's a Manchester band, right?
That sounds right, but I even mean through the '80s, the New Order, Joy Division, club scene. I think led into the Happy Mondays. I think they call it Manchester. You know, it was a whole scene. Like people kind of knew about it, at least in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a rich musical scene going on in Manchester. And Manchester's a decently sized city too. It's not like it's some tiny little nowheresville or anything like that. It's a working class city, but there was definitely a good music scene going on in there. So he gets this job with the Inspiral Carpets, goes on tour with them. He ends up meeting Mark Coyle, who is the guitar tech on the tour. Mark Coyle was described as the unofficial sixth member of Oasis. He definitely ends up being integral to the creation of Definitely Maybe. What's funny is that according to Coyle, even the members of the Inspiral Carpets were afraid of Noel. And he was just such an asshole and like such a not to be trifled with boss asshole guy, even though he's just a drum tech and he's not even qualified to be a drum tech.
I was going to say,
they're all afraid of him.
And this guy keeps setting up my drums incorrectly. Can we fire him? No, dude.
No.
Yeah. Well, he was eventually fired by them for being, quote, unprofessional and unapproachable, which was a pretty great description of what it really sounds like he manifested in Oasis.
Yeah.
But this is because I kept getting the brothers confused in my mind. This is the older brother who.
This is the older brother, Noel. Yes.
At least in recent years, seems like the more reasonable of the two. I imagine they're both pretty unreasonable, as the history will show. But Noel is like the slightly more mature one, right?
Well, he is, and he was older, and I feel like Noel also is more of an introspective kind of guy. So he is probably more aware of his foibles and his issues, whereas Liam is just sort of a loud, I've been able to blather my way through life so far, and I'm just going to continue doing that until somebody calls me on my bullshit. And oh, wait, now I'm worth like $70 million, so nobody's ever going to call me on my bullshit ever again. I can do whatever I want. So it's actually quite fateful that Noel is fired when he is, because he returns home to Manchester, and he's like, Liam's in a band? My fucking brother, this idiot that I've been in my room with no musical talent whatsoever. That guy's in a band? What the fuck is going on here?
Mom.
Yeah, seriously, though. He ends up going to see Oasis play. It's a local show in Manchester, and he's like, yeah, they're okay. Like, whatever. Nothing special, nothing great. I think they're okay. And even they said that at the time they just sort of had 4 songs that they were kind of just pounding their way through. Like they weren't developing a whole lot as a band. But Liam's like, hey, Noel, you should be our manager. You got music connections. You got some cred, man. You've been in here. You can get us some great gigs. And Noel's like, fuck no, I'm not going to be your manager. What is wrong with you? He's kind of not really interested in the entire project until Liam says, hey, man, why don't you just come and play with us? Just come and jam with us one time. And he goes to their rehearsal space and he starts playing with them, and he's playing some of their songs, and it's like, whatever. And then Liam's like, hey, you should play one of the songs that you wrote, teach it to us, and we'll play it. And Noel describes that as like a transformative moment in his life. He had never heard anybody else play his songs. He'd never had a band with him playing his songs before. And he's basically from that point on, he was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is an experience that, you know, there's not a whole lot of stuff in your life that lives up to the hype, but I gotta say, the first time that you were ever like really solidly playing original music with a band, and it's coming together and it's feeling good, that lives up to the damn hype. That feels pretty fucking great.
Sure.
Agreed.
Yeah. So at that point, he's like, all right, I'm in. I want to join the band. Now, there are conflicting stories told by both brothers as to how this happened.
I don't believe it.
To hear Noel tell it, they asked him to join the band, and they were kind of like, hey man, like, come on, please join our band. To hear Liam tell it, he says Noel begged him to be in the band, and he eventually relented and said, fine, you can come join the band if you want. I'm going to do you a favor, you fucking scrub. You got nothing else going on in your
They're
life.
both such assholes.
Yeah. Now, there's also the story that Noel says did not happen, that he came in and demanded that I'm going to be the band's leader. I'm going to write all the songs. I'm going to dictate all the parts. This is going to be my band. You're going to be playing my songs. Everybody else in the band says that that did happen. Noel says that did not happen. I'm going to guess that that probably did happen.
Could see that. Yep.
Yeah. So it's late 1991.
It only works when you have the songs, though, by the way.
That is
do you know what I mean? They didn't have to say yes to that, but if they liked his songs enough, then we talked about it with Neil Young coming into CSN. Like, hey man, he's worth it for the songs.
Yeah. You got 50 more of these? Yeah. All right. Come on in.
Yeah. All your baggage aside, I guess I will take it. If only they could have had a crystal ball and looked into the future, they probably still would have taken that devil's bargain. But it's like, we're going to burn hot and we're going to burn out. And then we're going to never be able to have the same creative output that we ever had because these two guys just can't get along.
Yeah.
I think it was recently, I forget which one. I think it might have been Liam was talking shit on the 1975 about how they were just terrible and derivative. And, you know, and the guy from the 1975, who I don't even particularly like, but his response was very level-headed. And he was like, yeah, that kind of sucks to hear. I loved Oasis growing up. They were one of my formative bands. And frankly, they could still be the biggest band in the world if those two brothers could just fucking get along for 20 minutes. You could still be the biggest band in the goddamn world, but you can't make it happen. So don't get angry at me because I'm the one out here doing it, which seems like a pretty reasonable approach to take. So, all right, late 1991. And one of the things that is happening in Britain that is very popular is the sort of techno house scene at the time. It has become one of the more dominant forces in youth culture, certainly. Not necessarily on the charts, but the young, cool, hip kids, a lot of them were listening to techno music and basically the antithesis of the Oasis style of pop rock that wasn't cool with the kids the way that they really thought that it should be. There's also a lot of aging rock musicians cashing in, your Phil's Colin, your Rod Stewart, and all that stuff. You know?
I was just thinking that this was the antidote to The Prodigy, which we also slammed many, many episodes ago. It's like,
yeah.
Well, again, over 100 episodes.
This is way better than The Prodigy. To be clear, to any listeners who might be doubting,
sure.
I can guarantee we all like this way more than that.
Yes, absolutely. So Oasis basically sees it as their mission to reclaim the UK sound for this kind of classic rock and roll style. And they're playing around for a year, and it's kind of, you know, they're sort of playing some of these songs and everything's going okay. And then to hear Noel describe it, he writes the song Live Forever. So this is like 92 or something like that. He writes the song Live Forever. And he basically says that was the time that he was like, I get it. I get how to write the kind of songs that I want to write. And everything sort of started accelerating from there in terms of his creative output and the songs that he started writing. And I will 100% agree. Live Forever is a very well written, very well constructed song. That's a good fucking pop song. And that was the one that sort of, again, got that creative spark going in him, which led to him writing the songs that ended up on Definitely Maybe, and I think reached their apex in What's the Story, Morning Glory. But we're going to move on from here. You know, they are basically getting more and more shows, but they're not getting any press whatsoever. They said that, like, nobody even said that we sucked. We couldn't get a single line written about us in any of the UK press. They're seeing that
you're so desperate that you'll even take a review that says these guys blow, because at least you see your name in print.
Exactly. Somebody saw your show. You know that somebody who is somewhat of a tastemaker says that, you know, they saw your show.
Yeah.
But they're getting completely ignored. They're totally underground. They're not making any real money. They're kind of struggling, but they are playing. They're liking being in a band. Liam and Noel are fighting. Surprise, surprise. but but it's not crazy fighting. It's more the shut the fuck up, I'm talking kind of fighting, and less the I want to murder you and I'm going to destroy this project kind of fighting. And I think
Brotherly bickering, we'll say.
yeah.
Well,
Healthy
listen, we've
brotherly.
talked about it before. Bands fight. It's tense. There's no
Expected. Yeah.
It's expected because you're making yourself vulnerable out there on stage or possibly through your writing or in all ways. And you really want to get to this next level, even if you haven't defined what it is. And it's just very personal, and you're also like young, so emotions are
Yeah.
just running high generally. I'm just saying
Well,
band fighting is the norm. That's all.
Sure. I will say it certainly did not help that Noel is the one out there writing all these songs, exposing himself through lyrics, being more personal, even though I don't think these lyrics are deeply personal, but all lyrics are personal in a way. And the quote from Liam is, I didn't get really involved in the whole music thing. That's kind of Noel's thing. You do that, and I'll just be cool as fuck over here. That was his attitude. Just like, how about you do all the work and I'll just be the fucking cool guy, right?
And I'll get
That
all
should
the
work.
girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't see why they clashed at any
No.
point. Yeah. All right. So Noel's writing songs. Oasis is producing, performing these songs. They're not getting any real traction. Like most bands, they are, again, poor. And so they're sharing a rehearsal space with another band who happens to be an all-girl band called Sister Lovers. And Sister Lovers, again, Manchester band, they get a gig in Glasgow at King Tut's Wawa Hut Club. What the fuck name is that? Whatever. Okay.
I mean, you take what you can get.
Take what you can get. Well, according to them, they were like, we got a gig outside of Manchester. That's big. Like,
Big
we
deal.
feel
Yeah,
great.
sure.
And Liam's like immediate reaction is like, why the fuck did you get that gig and we didn't get that gig? We're better than you. We should get that gig. Fuck you guys. And I don't know if this is like a woman thing or if these are just the nicest people in the world, but they were like, well, how about you come on up and play with us? Just come on up. Come up and play with us. And so Oasis, of course, like, yeah, totally. We're going to come and play. Look and blow you out of the water.
Right. Exactly. Name your destructor.
Yeah. They rent a van with a plan of driving up, playing the gig, getting completely shit-faced, sleeping in the van, and driving back home the next day. And they get up there. They're, of course, getting fucking ripped the entire drive up there. They get to the club, and the guy at the club is like, you're not on the bill. You're not coming in. You're not bringing your shit in. You're not playing here tonight, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Who are you? Right.
Yeah. Seriously, he's like, I don't know who you are. I've never read about you. There's been no press about you. You tell me that you're some
Not
fucking
on
band.
the bill, right?
You're not on the bill. And again, an amazing show of solidarity. The Sister Lovers say, well, we're not going to play if you don't let Oasis play. How about we'll give them half of our time? We'll play 5 songs. They can play 4 songs. Does that work? And the guy's like, whatever. I don't fucking care. I'm a doorman at a club. I don't really give a shit. Rob and I have experienced many times. Right. Like the people that book gigs and manage these clubs are completely checked out from moment one. It's kind of ridiculous.
So true.
And so anyway, they get to play. They've been playing around for a couple years. You know, they've been playing gigs. They're not an inexperienced band. They're not wowed by this gig in Glasgow. They sort of were just like, it's our fucking due because if these stupid bitches can get it, like, why can't we? And so they played their 4 songs and they're kind of like, yeah, all right, whatever. Unbeknownst to them, the bassist for Sister Lovers, Debbie Turner, is the ex-girlfriend of Alan McGee, who is the head of the ultra hip UK indie label Creation.
Of course.
Now, Alan said that he showed up to the gig to fuck with his ex-girlfriend, to basically make her nervous. and
Oh my
hopefully they
God.
would not perform well. It was not an act of love
Wow.
or support
Yeah.
or anything like that. He just kind of shows up to the gig to be a dick. And he sees Oasis play and he's like, he said after the first song, he was there with his younger sister. He said after the first song, his sister said, "You should sign this band." After the second song, he said, "Yeah, I think I should sign this band." After the third song, he said, "I'm going to sign this band tonight." And he ends up going over to Noel afterwards and he says, "Hey, do you want a record deal?" And Noel says, "With who?" He says, "With Creation Records." He says, "Fuck yeah, I want to deal with Creation Records because Creation Records, they actually have a lot of cred." Um,
Did he offer him the contract within earshot of the girlfriend? So maybe it's all just to just to really stick it to her. Hey, do you want to?
well, I mean, honestly, the best financial decision he ever made from spite, if that's the
Yeah,
case.
right.
You know,
Be true.
so Creation, they have a lot of cred. They are not uber successful in terms of financially successful, but they have released for bands like the Jesus and Mary Chain, like My Bloody Valentine, Primal Scream, Teenage Fan Club, and my favorite, Meat Whiplash. I have never heard them before, but I have to give them credit. That's a great name. Meat Whiplash is fantastic.
Rob, please put one Meat Whiplash song on the playlist this
Will
week.
do. Done and done.
So basically, he approaches Noel, says, "You want a record deal?" Noel says, "Yeah, we want a record deal." Now, there was some stuff that prevented them from actually signing it for a couple of months, but everybody was right in from the get-go. They're like, "Yes, we're all in. We want to make this happen." So it's December of 1993, and they get a recording set up by Alan McGee. They want to get their first few songs recorded, and the session is not going well. It's going very rough. Now, to hear Noel tell it, it's the drummer's fault. Basically, he said the drummer is not consistently keeping time. He's shit. That's why we couldn't get a good recording out of this recording session.
Needed to hire a drum tech.
Honestly, it's just their first time in the studio. I'm sure that they have no idea what they're doing. I'm sure that it's different. It's way different from playing on stage. Playing in the studio is just a different animal. And they probably just picked the quietest and least assuming guy in the band and were like, "It's your fault, motherfucker."
Well, it's also the hardest on the drummer, right? They're under, in a way, they're under the most scrutiny to get the take, as we all know. I know they were doing less overdubbing in these days, and I think Oasis' stated goal was to kind of not overdub and just record the live band. But in general, the drummer has the hardest job in the studio, I would say.
Yeah, nobody ever tells the guitar player, "You should play to a melodic track of all the notes that you're supposed to be hitting in your headphones." But they tell the drummer, "Play to a click track all the time. Like, you have to be right on the beat on the click track," which makes sense. If the rhythm is off and the timing is off, it's the drummer's fault. And it is noticeable even to people who don't really know music. But either way, session's going really bad. And Noel's getting really frustrated. And they basically are like, "We're going to take a break. Let's just walk away from it for a little bit before we kill each other." And Noel has been kicking around this riff for a little bit. And while the other guys are on break, he writes the song Supersonic. Right then and there in the studio, they come back in and he's like, "Hey, fuck what we were doing before. I have a brand new song. We're going to learn it right now and we're going to record it," which is usually a recipe for disaster when you're in the studio. Works out great. They record Supersonic. It ends up becoming a signature Oasis song. Good on them. Supersonic is released as a single in April of 1994. Remember, Definitely Maybe isn't released until August of 1994, so they pre-release it as a single.
All right.
It's a hit. Reaches number 31 on the singles charts. Finally, they're getting press. Finally, they're getting better gigs. And basically people are singing their songs back to them when they're playing live. Like before, we were playing like kind of small shows. Nobody was really giving all that much of a shit. We're, getting a little bit more following, a little bit more of a following. But once Supersonic hit, it was like they were like a real, quote unquote, real band that had real fans that showed up to see them because they wanted to see them play this one song that they knew from them.
I feel like that also has to be a transformative moment. You talked earlier about how hearing your song come to life with a band. Imagine also then having your song being sung back to you by strangers. I feel like that also is like another step up in your creative and your band career. It's got to be wild.
Unfortunately, Adam, I will have to just imagine that.
Same
I've never
here.
experienced it.
Do you remember that time, Tom, we were in Lodi and it was like small town, nice people energy, and they were slow dancing to our songs. We've never, what is going on right now? We've never seen
Yeah.
anything like this.
Yeah, they were really into it. And then we then proceeded to take a set break, and they told us it was an open bar, and we got absolutely fucking destroyed, and then completely blew the second set in a way that was shameful. And by we, I mean everybody but Rob, because Rob was sober at the time, and the most pissed off I think I've seen him in years.
It was a big shift. Yeah, we built up a lot of goodwill and we tore it all back down.
Yeah, I remember at the end of that show, I was playing drums at the time, just like head in hands, just like, oh my God, I'm gonna throw up on my fucking drum set. So bad.
Oh my God.
Well, and they also were like, oh, these guys are boozing hard. Let's send them shots up on stage and stuff. And we're like, yeah, all right. Not a good idea. Definitely.
Oh
Not.
man.
Anyway, we are going to flashback, though, to December of 93. All right. So they released Supersonic as a single in April 94. It starts doing well, but we're going to go back to December of 93. They had already had that one recording session that really did not go well, but it did yield Supersonic. So they get another recording session at Mono Valley Studios in Wales. And this time it goes terribly. Basically, they record the whole album. They record the entirety of the album minus Supersonic, and they send it to Alan McGee. He's like, this sounds terrible. This doesn't sound like you as a band. Like, what's going on here? And I have heard a little bit of the recordings there, and they sound hollow, and they sound underproduced, and they sound scared. They sound scared in the studio. They're tentative, hesitant, and a lot of Oasis is energy, and not there.
Yeah,
I heard
swagger.
an interview.
Yeah.
I heard an interview with Noel that said in the studio when they were listening to, the daily playbacks, they had, speakers that were the size of a house. So of course everything sounds awesome, but then they were taking them and listening to them in their car, and they were like, this doesn't sound like us. This sounds like another band.
Yeah. And that's what everybody said. It doesn't sound like you. I've seen you live. This is not you. What is going on with it? And I'm going to go ahead and give Alan McGee a lot of credit here, because this never happens. Creation Records is not doing well financially. He is paid £800 a day for this recording studio in Mono Valley in Wales to record this album. They record the whole album. They send it to him, and he says, you need to re-record this entire album. I will go out of pocket for you to re-record this entire album. This is not gonna do it. This doesn't work.
Because his name's attached to it as well, I suppose.
He just believed in the band. He's like, you can be a successful band. You can have hits, but this ain't it.
Right. Okay.
And so he goes farther out of pocket to get them to re-record again.
It's tough. It's tough because, like you said, the recording studio is so different than the live audience place. And to try to bring that energy to the studio can be really, really challenging. So no matter how much you might believe in the band, you also have to believe they can do that within reasonable amount of time. And there's definitely no guarantee that's going to happen. It's, it's like you're in a surgical theater in the sterile environment versus the club where you're getting all this feedback and natural energy coming at you. And they're really different beasts, like you said, Tom.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing to paper over mistakes in the studio. Live energy papers over a ton of mistakes.
Sure.
And again, I'm going to give Alan McGee a lot of credit, because even Noel said, well, how about we just release it as it is? We'll fix it on the next album. And he's like, you're not going to get a next album if you release this. So you can't do it. You have to re-record it. They book another recording session at Sawmill Studios. They fire the previous producer. They re-record the entire album, with Noel taking a much larger role in the production And Noel's friend from his drum tech days, Mark Coyle, stepping in as a producer as well. So that is where you get the tracks recorded for Definitely Maybe.
And they also, this was also about, I read that they thought that first version was kind of classic production style where you're trying to isolate everything and make the sounds really clean. And that was the one of the big shifts they made, right? It was not worrying about bleed, like putting all the amplifiers in the same room kind of vibe, and really trying to capture the live take directly.
Yes. And the bandness of it. And you do lose a lot of that band feel when you got a guitar player in another room that sometimes you can't even see playing, and the drummer is walled off somewhere, sometimes with foam padding and baffling around him.
Sure.
You can't see him. It is very isolating, and they do it more kind of big room sound. Everybody in one big ass room. Let's just get a good sound out of it. And so they record it. Mark Coyle does the mixing. He's been integral in the production of the album. He's a sound engineer as well. He had done live sound for them. So their whole thing was like, well, who does our live sound? Who's running the board at our live show? It's Mark Coyle. Mark Coyle should be the guy that mixes the album. Mark Coyle mixes the album, send it to Alan McGee, and he says, nope, that's not it. So this is twice in a row that he has said, this is not the product that you're going to put out. I don't think that this is good enough. Again, I'm giving him a lot of credit for that. I think that he has, I'm glad that he's made a lot of money off of it. I don't think that he gets enough credit for pushing them, again, because I don't think a lot of record labels do. That's one of the reasons why you want to go with a smaller indie record label. Capitol Records can take a loss on 50 albums. They don't give a shit. I'm like, whatever,
Right.
whatever. He was really like, if this hits, I will be set for life. This will be a major change in my record label's fortunes. This is a big deal. And I'm treating it like a big deal. And most of the time, it's only the band that's treating it like a big deal. It's a big deal for me, but for the record label, they're like, whatever, I got 50 deals out here that may or may not happen. They're sort of doing the quantity over quality approach.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, and to go with that, I think small labels, I think good label heads believe in trends almost more than they believe in individual bands. But if you're a small label, you don't, Capitol Records can have 5 bands that are playing to the same musical trend and hope that one hits,
Absolutely. And again, going back to when Alan McGee first saw them, I think the quote was that there were 6 people at the place and he and his sister were 2 of them. He had an experience and he was like, this is a great band. This band moved me. I want to get that. I want to capture that. He knew what he was trying to capture. And again, the band thought that the mixing was okay. Like, I think it's pretty good. They don't really know. Alan McGee, again, says, I'm going to go out of pocket again, and I'm going to get this guy Owen Morris to do a mix. And it overnight transforms the album. Apparently, there had been some new technology that allowed you to push the signal digitally without distorting.
The brick wall. They were calling it the brick wall processing. Yeah.
So, and he knew his stuff. He was an accomplished producer. And so he does a mix, and everybody's just like, holy shit, that's it. Like, that's the sound that we're going for. We have not heard it before on a recording. That's it.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So the brick wall, you mean like everything is compressed and loud at the same time, right?
Everything's taken up. There's nuance, but the signal itself is pushed as far to what they call the brick wall, which I don't know, 0 decibels or something. But that in terms of everything else, he said that when you would hear it on the radio or wherever you hear it, Oasis was louder than everything else. So it stuck out.
I saw someone write, I'm sure this is a related point, that this is pretty early in the CD era as well. And I think CDs played well with that technology that you're talking about, that kind of extra compressed, high fidelity, loud signal. So I do feel like that's a hallmark. In my mind, that's a hallmark of CDs themselves, but I guess it was just the era.
Well, and the fidelity is important because CDs are ultra high fidelity. It's a laser reading a disc. It's not magnetic tape running through heads that could be dirty. There's all kinds of room for distortion and signal fuck ups in tapes, in records, CDs. There's not the fidelity of the signal from the disc, unless the disc is really fucked up. It's laser to reading the disc. There's not a whole lot of room for mistakes there.
It's funny. Of course, I know that a good mix and an important professional mix can make a huge difference. We know that from our own recordings. And I don't think mixers get enough credit generally, right? But at the same time, I feel like the rule that you and I have been going off of, Tom, which seems pretty good, is if the songs aren't good without it being mixed yet, they're not going to get good in the mix. So I'm like slightly surprised, but I guess it somewhat makes sense.
I think it could have just been an intensity, because I think the kernels of the songs are generally good. They're not mind blowing, but they're generally good. But presentation does matter on the borderline. If it's borderline between an okay song and a good song, and a good presentation makes it sound like a good song.
I suppose you could argue too, the style is kind of wall of sound, especially with the guitars. There's a fair amount of layering, distorted, washy guitars. And I was maybe more attributing that to them all playing in the room together. But really, that is a function of how the mixer can balance those things to kind of make you hear them simultaneously.
Yeah. Without being muddy, too, because that's another thing. You can't just turn everything up, because then it's just
Right.
it's like adding every color to the palette. It just becomes brown. You have to get the differences in the sounds. You have to scoop out some of the mids to make other things
Right.
pop out. And so, yeah, good for them. I'm glad that they got the product that they wanted. And it sounds like it was a very onerous process. And on several occasions, Noel was just like, I fucking quit. I'm throwing my hands up. I don't know what to do. And Liam was just like, I don't give a shit. I'm just macking on these ladies over here, and I'm already drunk, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and whatever, pussy, with your fucking songs, baby, baby. Anyway, so we're going to jump forward in time a little bit. They've already released Supersonic. It's a hit. Supersonic's released in April of 94. They have the recording for Definitely Maybe. They're releasing singles before the album is out, though. So this is kind of an approach that I don't think was all that common, or I didn't think of it as that common. I thought you released the album and then you release the single, and then maybe you release the single like a week before the album, but not 6 months before the album. But so they have a single release in April. They release Shaker Maker in June 1994. And what, number 31 was Supersonic. Shaker Maker makes it into the top 20.
Damn.
Now I have a question for you. Can you identify which song they ripped off?
Yep.
I can.
Okay, good. That was immediate.
Same here.
I was like,
Yes.
I like to teach the world to sing. Yeah, they got sued for that, and they lost.
By Coca-Cola, right?
Because I'd like to give the world a Coke was what had popularized it. They bought the rights to that song.
Oh, there it is. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, they got sued, lost $500,000 for that, but that comes a little bit later. So basically, they have 2 charting singles. They haven't even released an album yet. They're getting like a lot of press. They're getting a lot of attention. And being the level-headed, down-to-earth lads that they are, they did not let fame go to their heads. They are remarked as unusually polite and civil for such a young band getting their first taste of success. I am, of course, kidding. They immediately become raging party animal assholes who are notorious for trashing hotel rooms.
Yes.
Which actually, notably, Noel says he never participated in because he said it seemed like too much work. It's like, you're breaking a sweat while you're breaking a hotel room. Why the fuck are you doing that?
Why?
It's just like a lot of effort, man. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
not doing that. But they're also super drunk and constantly getting into fights with random people and each other. They are getting written up by the tabloids all the time now. They are like tabloid fodder because they went from getting completely ignored by the press to basically being the target of these crazy debaucherous stories about new rock and roll. It's a throwback to the 70s. They were basically like, we're like Led Zeppelin. We're doing terrible things to women, probably. I don't actually have a whole lot of evidence that there were stories about them doing terrible things to women. It's more that
They were enjoying
raging,
themselves.
drunken assholes,
we'll say.
enjoying themselves. And yes, they do sound like complete dicks because they haven't even released an album at this point.
This
But-
is just from the 2 singles.
2 singles. But bear in mind,
fake it till you
Pump the-
make it.
Pump the brakes, fellas.
so Liam is 21 at this time. Wigsy and McCarroll are 23. Noel is 26. Paul Arthurs is 29 at this point, but he also has the nickname of Bonehead. So I'm guessing he wasn't the like voice of reason here or anything like that. And it does sound like
Hey,
he was an
fellas.
enthusiastic participant in the hotel trashing and all the other shit that went on. So it's also not exactly right to say that the fighting between Noel and Liam ratchets up at this point. I just think that the stakes get higher for these fights. They've always fought. Honestly, there was footage of them from right when Noel had joined. They hadn't done anything. They hadn't recorded anything. They didn't have a record contract or anything like that. And they're in their recording studio and Noel is talking and Liam just keeps interrupting him. And Noel's like, shut the fuck up. Like they're so pissed off at his brother. And I could totally tell why, because Liam was just like, oh, there's a little, I'm just gonna poke at that, poke at that, poke at that. Yeah, there we go. That's the reaction I want.
I noticed they really don't disappoint in interviews because I saw that too at a really early interview where the interviewer was like, so your older brother joined the band and took over all the songwriting. And Liam's like, well, yeah, but he didn't take over me. He's not the boss of me. Right away.
Yeah. No, there was another great interview where it's Liam and Noel, and the interviewer asked Liam a question. And Liam kind of like gets a thoughtful look on his face and he's about to talk. And Noel just goes, takes a long time to respond, doesn't he? Like right when he's about to say something, and Liam's like, fucking, yeah. All right. God damn it. I took a beat to answer a question here. Now, like, there's also a great interview. Oh my God, it's a clip. It's just Noel being interviewed. And the interviewer is like, would you say it's safe to say that all of the other members of Oasis are expendable except for you and Liam? And he's like, oh no, Liam's expendable.
That's awesome. That is also the most like British thing to say as well.
Yeah.
That dry sense of humor, whether or not he was
Yeah.
serious, but that's hilarious.
Yeah,
Great.
dude. So I have one story that just goes to their like overall level of debauchery, which is fucking hilarious. All right. So y'all remember that band, The Verve? They're the Bittersweet
Yes.
Symphony band, right? Or
Yeah.
The
Yeah, that's
Bittersweet
correct. That's
Symphony.
correct.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Not the Verve Pipe.
Also
Right.
I
sued
believe it was closing time. Oh, they also sued? Okay, good.
by the Rolling Stones.
Oh yeah. Oh, I thought you were talking about the Verve Pipe was also sued. Yes, the Verve was clearly sued by the Rolling Stones, but yes. So they get a gig opening up for the Verve in Amsterdam. It's the first international gig that they're ever going to play. And they're like, this is great. We're like on our way. Our record labels hooked us up with this great gig. They get on the ferry to go over to Amsterdam. And over the course of the evening, everybody but Noel gets arrested on the ferry.
Wow.
And they're not allowed in the country because
Oh my
apparently there was a
God.
casino there and there were a bunch of guys who were fans of a rival football club. And
Oh.
it just turned into a fight at one point. Apparently Liam just like ran by a roulette table and just like threw all the money off the table as he's running down, and they all got arrested and were not allowed in the country. And Noel had to call them up and be like, Noel called up again, Alan McGee, the guy who got them the gig, head of the record label. And Alan McGee was like, oh, that's fucking awesome. He was not phased by it at all. He's like, that's fucking rock and roll, man. That's punk rock. It's gonna be great. You're gonna get written about, and they become a huge story. Oh, these crazy lads can't even make it on an overnight ferry before they get arrested.
I mean, that's the other thing. Between that and the perhaps manufactured, perhaps real rivalry with Blur, they were able to capture press attention consistently. And you know what I mean? Even though it seems like they leverage their naturally douchey personalities to do that, but it was somewhat manufactured, right?
I think that the stuff with Blur, absolutely manufactured. Even they were like, we have this supposed rivalry. Like, I don't fucking care. We're both selling albums. Who gives a shit? I like Blur. I think that the personality of them I don't think that that was manufactured. I think that they were doing a whole bunch of crazy shit. I think that they were getting arrested. And I
Yeah.
think that the record label was like, I could send a minder after you to rein you in. Instead, I'm going to hire a driver who also gets arrested with you on driving on the over to Amsterdam. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Fantastic.
Right.
I more meant that that was another Beatles comp because of the Rolling Stones versus Beatles thing, when in fact they were
Yeah.
hanging out and they were friends. Yeah.
Totally,
Right.
Totally. All right. So that basically gets us up to the release of Definitely Maybe. They have all this hype, all this buzz coming up to the release of their album. They're getting written about in the tabloids all the time. They got a couple of hit singles. They end up releasing Live Forever a couple of weeks before Definitely Maybe is officially released. And how, you ask, was it received? Immediately hailed as a classic album of the 90s. As Rob mentioned, fastest selling debut album in UK history at the time. Went to number one in the UK charts, only 58 on the US charts, but number one in the US on the UK charts. In 1997, in a poll, so this wasn't critics, but it was just like a fan poll, it was named the 14th best album of all time. Not true.
Really?
Just not true. I'm sorry. It's not true.
Demonstrably false,
Yeah.
even though it's an opinion.
Yes. It is also, it is considered a landmark album of UK rock. So, in case you are not familiar with this album, let's dive into the songs. We're finally there at the songs,
Let's
people.
do it.
Appreciate the
Pumped.
patience.